he cannot comprehend. Like, here he is, he's a prince where everything's gone the way he's always wanted it because he's the prince. And then he tries to go and take an action that he thinks that he's going to be the big hero. And it goes really, really
He
wrong.
is completely unprepared for anything that happens there. It was almost kind of amusing in a way.
Yeah. That might have been like, that sequence might have been my favorite part to write of the entire book, because it was like, it was that like the hubris just going so very wrong and realizing, oh, so this is why my dad didn't do this. And,
hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast Homespun Script. I'm your host, Nate Knispel. With me today is science fiction author Gary Bloom. We will be discussing Gary's debut release, Antares Ascended, published in 2023. Set in a universe rich in detail and history with a vibrant religious backdrop, Antares Ascended initiates the narrative of an epic struggle for power amongst tribal factions occupying the planets around the star Cycla. Here's Gary reading from the novel.
The murders are still at the forefront of your mind, Tirsa began, once alone in her chambers. I attended your match this evening. It was painfully clear to me. Really, Tirsa? He shook his head. You're going to analyze me and not even offer me a glass of arak first? You know I don't keep spirits in my home, she admonished. And if you think I'm incorrect, I'm happy to call in an envoy so we can enter into Carva and let your thoughts spill out. Carva. Sargon stared at his palms. His volets seemed to throb, as if begging to be used. A third person would allow them to join the hard purple flesh to each other and unifying their minds. Opening up his thoughts again was mildly terrifying, but also somewhat comforting when Tirsa was involved. He'd spent more than enough time in Carver with his family since they lost their mother. What progress is being made in bringing Tupon to justice? I haven't talked to our father since returning to Sanctum, he said, choosing to change the subject instead. He and I spoke briefly yesterday. He plans to visit Sanctum soon, specifically to watch you compete. She arched an eyebrow. Hopefully, you put on a better performance when he does.
Cool. So do you have an audiobook version of this yet, Gary?
No, it's funny. I've had a few people ask me about that, and I had to do some research and figure out how to actually do that. Since, I mean, everything's been me. So
kind of on an
island comes just from like, I figured out how to get it out there. So I might look into it, though. I've had some friends ask me about it, too.
Cool. Well, anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure and privilege to talk with you on this.
Oh, this is great, man. I love it.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So let's see. I've been kind of a sci-fi nut since a young age. I grew up in a house where we didn't have a whole heck of a lot of money, but my parents were very big on like reading. We hit used bookstores from the time that they kind of became a thing, and my parents were cool about, like, they're very, very big into mysteries. They never pushed us into their thing. I found science fiction early, and earliest memories, like in the 80s and stuff like that, 80s and 90s, reading Michael A. Stackpole. I was big into BattleTech.
You too, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like honestly, like Felon Kell, one of my, or Felon Wolf, depending on where you want to be. But one of my all-time favorite characters ever, Michael A. Stackpole, one of my favorite writers ever. Guys like him and Timothy Zahn. I've gotten to the point where I've read almost every single book that Timothy Zahn has written at this point. So it's just a big sci-fi nut, and started kind of working on writing stuff while I was in college. Had a short-lived internet company while I was in college in the late 90s, where part of it was a serial called Star Killers, so it's something that's always been a big part of my life, and total credit to my parents for that.
Okay, awesome, cool. So I take it Antares Ascended kind of evolved out of this interest in sci-fi.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. It's kind of cool that it's funny the way it kind of generated. There was, we used to do, my friends and I used to play Star Wars, the role-playing game. And, the original, I guess it was TSR. And, when I went off to college, I used to think about like writing my own role-playing games and stuff like that. And I said, it's better when there's some sort of a universe that it's based around. And so I came up with this idea. I've always, I guess, had like a thing for wolves. And for those watching, no, the word wolf does not show up in my passwords anywhere. So sorry to disappoint. But I've always just like had a thing for wolves. So I created something called Wolf Brigade, and it was this idea of like a small planetary system, and it was a king and his three kids, and they all sort of had their own roles in it, and they were a little bit more warring against each other in that than than happens in Antares Ascended. But I'd say about, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, maybe at this point, I sat down and kind of brought that idea back to mind and changed it around, obviously, a bunch. Ended up crowdsourcing out my world building, like running ideas past people and kind of building up to what eventually became Antares Ascended. So, and I actually wrote it as a serial for a couple of years through Patreon. And then when I ended it, I had a couple of people, say, it's like, you should just make it a book, dude. Like it should be a book. And when I went back and started reading through, and it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, I could make this a book. Oh, wait, no, this needs to change, and this needs more explanation. And I don't like how this went, and just ended up doing this huge, big rewrite to now it's turning into a series, and it's so it's been a lot of fun.
That's cool. Yeah, there have been a lot of real success stories on the similar process like that. I think like Andy Weir's Martian, he was crowdsourcing a whole lot of the scientific ideas there, and I think Hugh Howey, the TV series Silo, his book Wool was also initially, I think, a serial thing on his blog, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
Ender's Game started as I think it started as like a short story or something of that nature. And then he turned it into this great universe.
Yeah, that's definitely not a short story anymore.
Oh, no.
Cool. So awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the rich world you've built. Sure. The history here is pretty varied and complex, and with the population being hybrids of the indigenous Volet, who have bred with another species, enigmatically named the Travelers. And this interbreeding has given rise to some interesting emergent qualities, which kind of shape the way culture develops. And I'd love to hear more about how you developed this and maybe explain the world a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of funny. And I'm trying to remember, somebody else had asked me this in an interview once on a website, where I've mentioned that one of my closest friends, a guy named John Dunn. There we go, got a name drop on someone who no one's ever heard of, but I believe he's got an IMDb page, so feel free to go check him out. But so my best friend John Dunn told me years ago, because he's also a science fiction writer. He's like, a lot of the key is build this rich world and don't show everybody everything, and like have certain things where there are assumptions being made by the characters because they live in the world and they know how all this stuff goes. So that was part of what I did, and this is, I don't think, a spoiler because I kind of drop hints all over the place. The mysterious travelers, they're humans, and so the idea was that they merged with this indigenous life form, and which they were called the Volets, and they became now like these fleshy purple bumps essentially on people's palms, where you press them together and you have 3 or more people linked up in a daisy chain, and they can go into a shared mind space. And that's what I called Carva. And like I wanted to have something where it's kind of a cool mystically thing, but it's also just a normal part of life. It's like, yeah, you know what? Like you read in the book, like you get to see like almost like a courtroom element, except it's in Carva. And so like the things that you can do in the shared mind space and with your avatars, and some folks are just there. Other folks have actual ability to control it and to do big things. And I let it kind of play out pretty mellow in the beginning, and then in book 2, actually, I get into like some of the more interesting things that can happen within Carva, and but again, it's like, some folks can do it, some folks can't. So it became kind of I wanted to have a way to link folks that was just subtly different enough to make them a little bit alien, but then the violent nature, it's kind of taking to the idea of, even though it's supposed to be in the future and it's supposed to be, these humans have somehow landed here, and there's myths and legends in their own, pantheon of gods of how they wound up there. But
Mhm.
they wind up there, and they're returning to an almost more feudal and feral state. And
Yeah.
so, like, the violent nature of humans mixed with what the Volats have unleashed makes this the whole idea of homins being very, very violent by nature. And so the
Mhm.
whole idea of House Antares thinking, no, like, this is not what you should do. And House Virachoa being the yes, embrace it, like, kill all. And so
Mhm.
I allude constantly to the War of Lords. And the War
Mhm.
of Lords is this whole idea of that after the merging, different factions kind of formed up and made
Mhm.
made themselves as houses,
Yeah.
and so, like, alluding to a bit more of a fantasy style aspect,
Mhm.
but still staying within a space opera mentality, and having technology and having things that the folks can do, like the concept of the pulse baton, or sometimes we just call it a bat. Like, that's
Yeah.
something that's come all the way from the original Wolf Brigade concept.
Ah.
And it's just something that I find a lot of fun, because, like, I play around with things where it's like, okay, well, what if I made this one subtle change? So, like, it's you don't hear there's nothing about steel or iron, cobalt. It ends up
Mhm.
being like the most prevalent thing that folks do, and or so that they use rather, and it's just something where, like, I wanted to tell a story, but I wanted
Mhm.
to have some subtle changes to make it so it's like, oh, well, this is a little bit different. And maybe when you first read about it as you're going through, it's, wow, that's a little weird. Okay, that's a little odd. And then you
Mhm.
just sort of get used to it. It just becomes part of the universe, and you're used to it's like, oh, of course they do this and they say that and they use these and they eat this and they drink that, and
Mhm.
it just starts to become very, very subtly ingrained in your head, to the point where you hit the middle of the book and you're like, oh yeah, well, of course this, and it's, oh yeah, no, I should have seen that coming,
Mhm.
and so that was part of how I enjoyed writing it. I thought it
Mhm.
was it was just something that kind of played with ideas that I've had when watching other movies and reading other books. It's like, oh man, I wish they had done this
Mhm.
instead. And so it's like, okay, I created my own universe where they can do that instead.
Mhm. Yeah. This one thing I found interesting that you touched on here is the way technology develops and has developed in this universe differs significantly from what one might expect from a population capable, first of all, of interplanetary travel, and also so focused on combat. Because you mentioned these pulse
Yep.
batons are the primary weapon, and
Oh
I always
yeah,
pictured them as like electric baseball bats. And
that's
yeah,
pretty spot on. Like, that was what was in
okay.
my head when I first came up with them.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting how these like little subtle changes that you have in there, if you like using different materials and having a slightly different mentality on how combat should take place, but they have a huge impact on the way culture develops in the whole
Yeah,
universe. And I'm wondering if you can comment maybe a little bit more on that process of world building.
yeah. So it was funny because I I I, I was introduced to the concept of space elevators just in general, probably about 20 years ago,
Mhm.
and it always fascinated me, and it made me think about, it's like, well, why don't we do that more often? Why isn't that more of a thing? It's if you've read Kim Stanley Robinson's Mars
Oh, the
trilogy.
Mars series.
So
Yeah.
yeah, what's it?
Hmm.
Red, blue, and then green, I think, is the last one.
Hmm.
And space elevators is part of it. It just, the concept fascinates me. Um, and I just thought about, it's like, all right, why would you need that? Like, why would it make sense, and why would it be easier? Because I've asked people, like, well, why can't we do that now? Oh, well, the way that the air pressure works and wind forces and all these things, and people have given me different scientific reasons for why it wouldn't work.
Hmm.
It's it's nice when there are engineers in your family and you can ask dumb questions like that.
Okay. Well, yeah,
Um,
not a dumb question at all, because
yeah, well,
the practical benefits of that are
yeah,
amazing, because you've almost solved the problem of gravitational pull and getting a spaceship off the Earth.
well, and so part of my thought, though, was like, okay, well, if you're going to change things so that you can have this space elevator and you can make things
Mhm.
work. And it's like, yeah, you bring everything to the top, and then you're out in space, and then just firing off is no big deal, right?
Mhm.
You don't have to go through the turmoil of sending a rocket up and having, like, an itty bitty capsule with some payload, and then all of this stuff that it just so. What would you need? Well, you would probably need thinner atmosphere. You would probably you would need changes so that it could actually be there and it could exist and not be constantly at risk.
Mhm.
But when you change the planet so that it can do that, what other changes go on? And so
Yeah.
they can't fly.
Right.
Like there's a sequence at some point. They're. I mean, this isn't really a spoiler, right? So Tupan has taken over Harco, which is this island city that was supposed to be this great achievement, and it turned out to go really really badly.
Mhm.
And so now, this has become his rebel base, and they're
Mhm.
trying to figure like how do they get there because it's got these high mountains and there's all these problems, and like, and so one of the military leaders goes to talk to the chief scientist, and he's couldn't we do something like and he mentions a bird called a strix, which
Mhm.
is this it's like a essentially a flightless bird, but it can glide. Like if it jumps
Mhm.
off a mountaintop, it can glide. And he basically lambasts him as that being ridiculous. It's like,
Mhm.
no, everything is it's landcraft and watercraft. And we can't fly.
Yeah, there's no atmosphere
It's
for it. Uh-huh.
like all kind of stupid. It's like listen, if you think that you little soldier are as smart as me, the Mr. Science,
Mhm.
no, just no. And he sort
Mhm.
of dismisses it. And it's like I don't really touch a whole lot on it. It's just sort of one of those things where everybody understands, like, yeah, you can't fly. Like we can go into
Mhm.
space and we can travel between planets and moons, but otherwise get to walking or get to swimming, buddy.
Mhm.
And that was one of the things where I remember when I first started writing it, I said I was like, I wrote this big long explanation, and I did a bunch of research and all kinds of science about it. I was
Mhm.
like, this is dumb. No one's going to have that big of drawn out explanation.
Mhm.
Like, it's better if I just dismiss it with condescension and
Mhm.
like give a little bit of a talk into it. But this doesn't need to have I'm not big into the hard science fiction
Yeah.
stuff. I freely admit I'm a pretty smart guy, but I'm not at the point where I'm not going to be writing any Asimov novels.
Mhm.
So it was just sort of a what, something like this. You're going to have a haughty chief of science for the entire empire. Just dismissing this guy is like, who the hell are you that you think
Yeah.
that you're going to come in and solve this problem that we've had for generations? Go away.
Mhm.
And but that's one of the things that I enjoy doing with technology.
Mhm.
It's like with the whole concept of the violence and stuff like that. It's just the bat even has a ranged capability, right? There are
Mhm.
there are some that are specialized where it's like, I mean, they're hollow, so
Mhm.
there are archers that can shoot projectiles like
Mhm.
from the inside of the bat, but they're not that far long range. So you
Mhm.
don't get tanks and you don't get, like those kind of weaponries. Yeah, there catapults show up in this because it's something that makes sense and they're more technical, for what they do,
Mhm.
but it's still catapults. And it's just taking this idea of, combat is something that we do hand to hand, we do closely together because
Mhm.
it's about the fight. It's the main sport of the empire
Mhm.
is arena fighting. And you
Mhm.
have these gladiators now. Part of what House Virachoa thinks is absolutely asinine that House Antares embraces is that they wear warden suits, and a warden suit basically like it registers the pain and stuff like that. And think of it almost as if you're wearing a video game, and so as
Mhm.
you get hit, yeah, like it may hurt your shoulder a little bit, it may hurt but you're not going to actually be injured. But this thing's going to register, and everything is like it's a knockout by points as opposed to actually destroying your opponent,
Yeah.
leaving them bloody on the floor. And but that's it. It's like it's to have that violent factor. It's to have that element of the physical connection. And and that's something that I found like in so much of the science fiction that I read, there is that detachment, right? Like Luke blows up the Death Star from the inside of a ship,
Mhm.
and and Ender. I hopefully I'm not spoiling Star Wars and Ender's Game for anybody, but
Mhm.
Ender turns around and like destroys the enemy, destroys their planet from far, far away.
Yeah.
And so there's always that detachment in science fiction of lasers and ships and cannons. And so to take it, and put it back to, almost the idea of like, what's the coolest thing that everybody loves in Star Wars? It's the lightsaber
Oh
duels,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So putting it back together like that was one of the things that always sort of appealed to me about about Star Wars and about fantasy novels of,
Mhm.
you know, you're not doing stuff from far away. And I like the connection there because I think that it lends to the violent nature, and it kind of reinforces what I'm saying these people are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it intensifies just the way they think about each other in
Yes.
terms of who's valuable, who has integrity, and who doesn't have integrity, and their entire value system.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, and the political situation is very interesting as well, because two main houses here. There's House Verichoa, who are the kind of the rebellious
Yep.
bad guys of everything, and they are incredibly violent. And
Oh,
then
yes.
there's House Antares, who are a little bit, just value hand-to-hand combat, but they do the hand-to-hand combat for fun with training wheels on.
Yes.
And yeah, and I took it at first. It took me a while to register this, but it seemed as though all their political decisions were made using kind of an archaic logic, where one of the guys on the other side is saying, "Oh, hey, I can beat that other general in hand-to-hand combat." And
Yeah.
no one thinks that way on Earth right now, but this is the way that they think. And it led me to believe, like, okay, this might not be a very fun place to live in, but that's just the facet of the world you're talking about right there. And you mentioned this general ethos a little bit already, but I'd love to hear you develop it a little bit more.
Yeah. So the way, and a lot of stuff harkens back to the War of Lords, right?
Mhm.
There's this underlying concern from Ogun,
Okay,
of
Ogun is House
sorry,
Antares leader.
yes,
Yeah.
Ogun Antares. He is the Archon of the Empire,
Hmm.
and Ogun is like he's always got this underlying concern of uh, he doesn't want to start another War of Lords, right?
Hmm.
And the idea is that there are houses that no longer exist,
Hmm.
and that were completely wiped out during the War of Lords. And
Hmm.
he alludes to, in some points, it's like, hey, where our population should be right now.
Hmm.
And because everything started on Doma before they moved off to the other planets, it's like we should be far more populous. We should own more of this world. We should own more of our other worlds. And,
Hmm.
this thing set us back so badly,
Hmm.
because just so many people were lost from
Hmm.
generations ago that like it compounds itself for
Hmm.
who should be here now. And so you've got the Council of Travelers, which are basically the descendants of houses that had aligned themselves with House Antares,
Hmm.
and it really came down to Antares versus Verichoa in the War of Lords. And so now here you are, and like Verichoa has a place on the council.
Hmm.
Like that's the whole idea is that the Antares wanted to pacify, they wanted to unify, they wanted to see a way forward without destroying each other.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of a big play in my mind of like what would that look like if, yeah, hey, here's this accord where everybody kind of works together, someone doesn't quite feel it, right?
Hmm.
And there's I start to talk about Ocala Veritoa, who she had married into the Antares family. Like she's married to, or she was married to Ogun's younger brother. And
Hmm.
so like technically Tupan Veritoa is Tupan Antares, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's everything starts off and you kind of come into it's already happened, but we start alluding to the things that happen where Tupan had engineered what was supposed to be an assassination attempt of his uncle, and it
Hmm.
turned out to be of his aunt, the Arcona,
Hmm.
and of his own father and his own brother. And like
Hmm.
they even flash back at some points to him arguing with his older brother, who like I mean he was in the Royal Guard. He embraced being Antares, and Tupan, talk about how like, oh, like they betray. He's like, no, it's not they, it's us. Like you're an Antares. Like,
Hmm.
what are you doing? And so it's basically that Ocala constantly plotting, and the idea of her being pacified by marrying into this family, and it
Hmm.
being like it was her house leadership had thought this is the way that we're going to unify, right, between the two major factions. And she didn't take it quite as well as
Yeah.
as perhaps folks thought that that they would. And so like she's always plotting and she's always thinking through it. And there's parts where I allude to her training up Tupan as a kid on the histories, and
Hmm.
but history from her perspective.
Oh yeah.
Not the history as it's necessarily written, but like helping him to see how she sees it. And so fomenting this in her younger son, because her older son has embraced it. Her husband, knowing he's never going to be Archon, he's
Mhm.
good guy, but he's all about the good time,
Yeah.
and he wants to have fun and he wants to be happy, and and he's a loving father and a loving brother and all this good stuff, and like you never actually meet Ulster. You kind
Mhm.
of meet him through touching through like memories and stuff like that,
Mhm.
and so like that was this concept where you even see in council sessions, you've got Ogun, you've got the other houses there, a lot of whom kind of agree with him,
Mhm.
and then there's always like the outlier of Rogel Verichoa, who is the counselor, who is representative from, and they are a major house, right? I have major and minor houses, and so the major houses are on the Council of Travelers, and and they've all got their protectorates throughout the star system, except for House Verichoa. They're the only ones who don't own anything. They're not
Yeah.
barons or anything over any kind of land or anything like that. They're
Yeah.
just sort of there, and
Yeah.
so it's the slighted, and it's the idea is that the Empire is supposed to be the good guys,
Mhm.
which I know that any Star Wars fan is probably going, "I'm sorry, you did what now?" But yeah,
Right.
like it's supposed to be the good guys. It's like the
Yeah.
Antares one. They don't want people to be constantly pitted against each other.
Mhm.
They don't want constant death. They're like, yeah, we're trying to build a good society,
Mhm.
and they're trying to be benevolent. And House Vericho doesn't want that. House
It is
Vericho
kind of
wants bloodshed.
Yeah, it is kind of an ethical flip there because Antares, see, you frame them as the good guys, but also Ogun is all about colonization,
Oh
and we
yeah,
see this kind of through his son Portus. When Portus says, "Hey, I can get a little in here to colonize some planets to carve up my own little section of power." But
yeah,
yeah, they're colonizers, and they do want to have kind of an empire. And then Verichoa, they're actually super violent, and they're the rebels. They're kind of the redheaded stepchild. And yeah, let's look at a little more detail this relationship between Ocala and Tupan. And yeah, Tupan is kind of the king of House Verichoa.
yep,
Ocala is his mother, who is incredibly manipulative
oh yeah,
and facilitated the death of her husband, who didn't have any ambition at all,
yep,
and is kind of fostering this sense of ruthless ambition in Tupan. And Tupan's nuts, man. Tupan is
oh yeah.
absolutely crazy. And I'm wondering if you could maybe develop or talk a little bit about how that relationship between Ocala, the manipulative, demanding a mother in this case, and Tupan, the absolutely crazy king,
Yeah.
develops.
So it's funny because it's you know that the whole idea behind it is, yeah, like Tupan set up as the king. He's the
Mhm.
rebel king. He's the king of House Verichoa, the kingdom of Verichoa. And he puts on airs and stuff like that. And he's sort of got delusion. He likes the trappings of power. He
Mhm.
likes to he's just a vile individual, right?
Mhm.
Like he is one despicable Haman, man. And it's like people ask you sometimes, like, hey, do you base any of your characters off of anybody? Like, are you Ogun? Or you? I was like, no. You know what? I mean, there are elements of people who I've met or characters that. But when it comes to Tupan, like my goal was, I want him to be based on no one. I want
Mhm.
him to be just vile. I
Mhm.
want you to understandably dislike this guy, and
Mhm.
not because of one thing, or it's just like, oh, you can't trust him and you don't want to be around him, and and you should be afraid of him, and every interaction should be, oh, like you want to
Yeah.
wash your hand if you've shaken his, type of thing. And so his mother wants the return of the power of the house. And one of the dynamic clashes that you have, and you'll see in book two also, is that it's like, to Akala, it is house over everything, right?
Mhm.
So she gave up on her first son because he embraced House
Mhm.
Antares. To him,
Lacked
that's what he
ambition.
was.
Yeah.
That's what I've always known. Like, I was born into the royal family. I
Uh-huh.
am part of, like, these are my cousins. I like, Ogun looked upon him favorably, but of course she spins it, right? Because it's like,
Mhm.
oh, he's not, he's not looked at upon as a prince. He wanted to be a soldier. He wants to be part of the royal guard. That's what he wants to be. And
Mhm.
so Ogun, it's like, if that's what you want, dude, I'm going to give you what you want. because you're my nephew and I love you, and that's what you're into. And from Ocala's perspective, it's like you made him lowly, you made him a servant. What's the
Yeah.
matter with you? And so it's like there's this hatred between Ocala and Ogun, and Ocala wants to manipulate things so that they will come to pass of the power of her house, right? And so she's very very smart. She's very very strong willed. She
Hmm.
is like she's always a step ahead, and she knows how to get the most out of people, right? Like the
Hmm.
reality is that she's the leader.
Yeah.
She is the power, but she also wanted to, like, she's thinking down the line, how do I create legacy?
Hmm.
And so it's, oh, I'm going to prop my son up as the king, and I'm going to teach him all these things. And there's a lot of, you see, like, she tries to get him to do the things that she needs him to do to make House Verichoa strong. And he keeps saying, like, well, I am House Verichoa, I am the kingdom. There's
Hmm.
one of the big parts of the book is this prophecy, right?
Hmm.
And the whole concept is that the long ago, uh, a prophet from the goddess Anatara, who's the goddess of chaos, she says, a Virachoa will rise again, right? And so Ocala's convinced Tupan, yeah, that's you. Like, they're talking about you. And
Hmm.
so you're going to change things and you're going to bring chaos back, which in a way, in a way he does, right? But it's through her.
Hmm.
It's through her thoughts. Like, he doesn't think all the way past. Like, he likes to dominate others in any way that he can,
Hmm.
whether it's in conversation, whether it's, what I mean? Like, I'm not big on writing sex scenes or anything like that,
Hmm.
but I allude to things that he's done. And and he's somewhere, and you talk about it in both books, where, like, he doesn't care about gender. He cares about, I want to dominate that person in any
Yeah.
way that I can. And
Hmm.
so,
I
like,
pick. Yeah.
early on, he's dominating. He's in a relationship with a female.
Hmm.
Then he dominates males, and he
Hmm.
doesn't care. It's not, for him, it's not about love, it's not about attraction, it's about power.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
so
I think
that's what he
he's like
wants.
a harem, doesn't he? And he says, "I want both men and women in this harem." It's not
Yeah,
about sex or
yeah,
love. It's just I want to have power over other
yes,
people, and this
exactly.
is a way to do that.
And
Yeah.
that's what it is. And yet she's trying to guide him into the things that she wants, and she needs to, and it's funny because it's not like Ocala's not manipulative for her own power. And that's the thing that I think is important, because
Yeah.
in a lot of books, like, you see a villain of that nature, they're manipulative because they want for them.
Hmm.
And you go into to any any science fiction where it's like it's somebody always manipulating for themselves, except she is, in her mind, she's trying to do good.
Hmm.
She's trying to restore her house to the glory that it once was,
Hmm.
and she's going to find ways to make that happen and bring in stronger her allies to do that. And it's all about the house, and she's willing to sacrifice in order to get there. Something that I allude to, but I don't think I outright say at any point, is that in this initial assassination, and the idea is that this, they tell you that, like, I outright kind of talk about this early on in the book. It's they were doing a visit of Harko, and it was supposed to originally be Ogun. He couldn't make it, so his wife Minerva goes, and and her personal guard is Cadmael, who is Tupon's older brother, and so
Hmm.
they're there all together. His father's there and all that, and they're supposed to inspect Harko as, like, hey, we're opening this, like, this is going to be like a ribbon cutting ceremony,
Hmm.
and instead Tupon engineers this this bloodbath.
Yeah.
And it's Ocala who helped him plan it, though, and so
Hmm.
she gets hurt in the process,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
And
for show. Yeah.
yeah, like just so that she can show that it's like it wasn't her, but it was her. And
Oh
like,
yeah.
and there are points where you'll see, like, he's a mama's boy,
Hmm.
and so he's like deferring to her and talking about what she should be called, and the importance of the. And she's saying, no, we have a king. This is how you need to lay this out. Like, this is how you
Hmm.
have to think about this, because from her mind, she's like, I'm not gonna have any more kids. I
Hmm.
don't. I'm not, like, I'm not going to be producing heirs. I need to be thinking about producing. And so there's part of it where she's trying to figure out, like, how can I produce heirs? How do I make sure the next generation happens after my son? And, and in book 2, we get into that where like she's looking to actually groom them and make sure that she's going to, and it's like, she doesn't want power. There are things that she does to take power in order to move things in the right direction, but she doesn't want to be in charge. Like not formally. She wants to guide behind the scenes, and she wants to be the person who's going to, I'm going to put you over here, I put you over there, and put you over there. Not because I can control you, but because you know how to do this really well, and I want you to do this really well, and you know how to do that, and I need you to safeguard. I need you to make this into something bigger than just this like ragtag collection that we are right now. And so, like as Tupon goes along, he becomes more self-interested and doesn't want to hear in it. It's like, I don't need to do those things. I don't need to talk like that. Like, I don't care what my image is. I am the house, and my image is whatever I want it to be. And so they butt heads time and again because he just doesn't want to be a leader of a house that creates a legacy. He wants to do the things that he wants to do and sees it as, oh, I have the power and the ability to do whatever I want, which in theory he always did, right? Because he was a prince. Like it's Antares Ascended, there's like a lot of people think it's just about, oh, it's Ogun winning, or is it one of the sons coming up? It's like, well, the thing that a lot of folks forget about, it's like, who ascends? Tupon Antares ascends, and he rejects the name and he rejects the family, but there's a lot involved where it's not just about Ogun. And I think that's really, really important to play. I don't like one note. I don't like black and white's okay for a short story, but not for something like this.
There are definitely some ethically gray areas here. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about I just said ethically gray areas, and now I'm going to say the quote unquote, with big scare quotes there, the good guys, namely House Antares. Yeah. So they seem a little bit more straightforward at the start, but the Archon, or the leader, Ogun, has a little bit more to him than we initially see, as do many others in House Antares. So can you talk about them for a little bit?
Yeah. So Ogun's got this interesting mix of like there are things that he knows he's good at, and there's things that he feels good about. But he's also got like the fake it till you make it, and he's got imposter syndrome.
This is Ogun.
Yeah, this is Ogun, and he, he became Archon sooner than he thought he should. Not that necessarily anyone else thinks that, but he does. And it's I because of the tech world that I work in and have basically lived in for a few decades now. I've actually been subject to, and so I've researched just the concept of imposter syndrome, and I've decided it makes sense that he would sort of have that layered in there a little bit. And so like he's got this fear, this overriding fear of the War of Lords. Like, hey, why haven't you gone and obliterated Harko? Just why haven't you just wiped all of these people off the face of the planet? And how come you haven't done this? How come you haven't done that? Like, how haven't you? And there's all of this stuff from his family, from other members of the council. And like, it's this well-documented fear of, I don't want to start another War of Lords. I'm afraid of this prophecy. And it comes around again and again and again. And eventually he grows into embracing and saying, all right, forget it. We're going to go, and this is what we're going to do. But he tries to back channel, and he tries to negotiate, and he tries to find ways to do things behind the scenes to prevent these things that he's afraid of. And there are gray areas that he kind of wanders into. And yeah, like he's supposed to be the good guy, and he is mostly a good guy.
He's just too good sometimes, right?
Yeah, like no one is good all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I know like people talk about like the whole kind of Pollyanna complex and stuff like that. And I don't want to have a good guy who's just a good guy. I've been reading Superman since the mid '80s. Huge fan of Superman, and yes, it's great to have this virtuous icon that you can point to, but that's not that's not reality for people in general, right? And since the homins are, based off of humans, just more violent because of their merger with the Volits, there's this aspect of him trying to fight down his nature, right? That's a big part of what House Antares is. It's like, yeah, like being a little more puritanical, like you need to fight off your baser urges. And so like there are points where he loses his temper all over the place in the book. And he reins himself in, and that's a big part of like who he is and who his family is. But he gets angry and he says things where it's like, dude, what is the matter with you?
Yeah.
And there's a couple of foils here and there for him, and like Xandria Koss is one of my favorite characters to write. I actually based her off of a character that Tyne Daly played in a show called Judging Amy, which that's got to be like 15 years ago or so, if not more. But she's sarcastic and she's like she busts his chops, and it's like no, you're not. I get that you're the Archon and you're a big deal, but I've still known you since you were a little boy, and I like if you put on airs, I'm going to knock you down a peg. And she does a good job like helping him rein himself in. And so like but the fear is always there. And he's always worried that he's going to do something that it's like, oh yeah, like my father didn't have this problem, my grandfather didn't have this problem, but they created the problem.
Yeah.
It's like we're in the situation we are now because they thought they were doing the right thing. And the reality is that like no one really knew, and like no one knows what to do with House Verichoa because of who and what they are. But, he's trying to figure out like, no, I can't go in and imprison these people, but maybe I need to. I can't beat this guy down, but maybe I need to. He's one of those that has the ability within Carva to do more, to impress his will on others. I talk about all the time how he can change his projected avatar to be much, much larger. He can be booming and shake the room essentially. And he has the ability to diminish others. And sometimes he does. Because again, like, yeah, people get pissed. A lot of folks forget. It's like as good and as holy as the great Jedi Luke Skywalker's.
Yeah.
Dude, Ben Kenobi gets struck down and he just starts shooting at him. Like, he's just like, I'm going to just kill people now. I'm pissed. Yeah. And it's like, okay, like eventually you figure out, that was probably bad.
Yeah.
But in the moment, it's like there's emotion. And I thought it was really important to continue thinking it's important to create my characters with emotion. Like Portis does things that can be childish. And, from the passage that I read in the beginning, Sargon sulks sometimes, like he's the youngest of three. And there's like, yes, Tirza is the princess, and she is like the high priestess, and like she's a big deal to everyone else. To Sargon, it's like, that's my big sister just giving me a hard time.
Yeah.
And so it's like there's emotion. There are people questioning their own decisions and motives, except for Tupon. Tupon never questions a damn thing, because to him it's like, shit, I can do whatever I want. And that's what it is. It's I wanted to make sure that they had personalities, and and family traits are important. So like there is the weaving through of similarities within different families, but everyone's got to have their own perspective and their own attitudes and their own reasons for doing things. And that's where conflict comes from, right? Like just like in the real world, like that's where conflict comes from two people who think that the other one should be on the same page as them, and they're not quite. And that's why it works to me.
Cool. So you've already mentioned a couple of your favorite parts of the book. What were some of your other favorite parts to write, and which parts are you most proud of?
So there's a character named Vankin Rate, who also known as Wraith. When I was writing this as a serial, one of the things that I used to do was that I created a bunch of arena fighters, and because I was originally a programmer, and so I actually created a whole setup where like I could go ahead and I could simulate arena fights between between different characters. And so I would it would kind of do a screen printout of like here's the blow by blow, and and I can mess with characters and I can manipulate them within brackets, and like I had them in
Oh,
tournaments.
cool.
And so yeah, so it was a lot of fun. And Wraith was always one of my favorite characters.
Mhm.
And so what I decided to do is that when I turned it into, when I took it from being serial to being like a book,
Mhm.
you know what? I want to make Wraith and his son, like I want to make this a true storyline. I want to make this
Mhm.
something interesting, kind of a subplot that goes on. And so he kind of becomes like a burgeoning, kind of a hero. Almost think of it as if there were like some sort of legendary athlete that
Mhm.
had fallen to the wayside and lost his shine, and now in some new conflict he's kind of rising up, and it's like, oh hey, you know what, you can't do the things you used to do before, but you're still pretty good and you're
Mhm.
teaching others, and this is really interesting because I can use you in a different way than I had thought. That I'm not just going to throw you as a frontline soldier. Like I'm going to use you in this way to help these other guys and teach them things they
Mhm.
don't know. And so it was a lot of fun to write him. And I actually got to the point where I decided that book 3 he's going to be a main character.
Oh, cool.
He becomes a little bit more important, and things that we allude to that I allude to in
Mhm.
we, as if there's a big team here, that I allude to in book 2, and he's going to become like a much bigger deal. And it was kind of fun to like create this sort of father son dynamic. Um,
Mhm.
there's a part where so you had mentioned about earlier on about like the idea of, yeah, I could beat this guy one on one,
Yeah.
right? And there's a part where that happens. There's a so there was there was a champion, an arena champion, who ends up defecting the other side,
Mhm.
and this guy's like unbeatable, and so we get to the point where there's a big battle going on. They're on Harco. They're fighting, and here's Wraith's son, and he's going in, and he's going to decide to try and go one on one with this guy
Mhm.
Chiron Zark, and he's
Yeah.
like, yeah, and it's like when I was writing it, and I originally wrote this just like this epic long, there's like pages of the battle. I was like, and I went back and I read it. I said, that's stupid. You're in like it's war, and
Yeah.
like, yeah, I know, like there's you see in movies all, no, we're gonna go one on one, it's gonna decide it. Like that's dumb. That wouldn't actually happen in reality. And so I
Mhm.
actually ended up thinking, I was like, how could I change this so that it's a bit more realistic? And I started thinking about Raiders of the Lost Ark. And if you remember in the scene, like the guy comes out and he's got these swords, and he's gonna kill Indy, and he just shoots him.
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
And I took that, it's like so they start battling, whatever, and this guy just shoots him
Mhm.
and comes running over, like it's like, all right, come on, let's go. It's like, I had it. It's like, yeah, we don't have time for that crap. Like, let's go.
Right. Yeah. This is
You
war.
know?
This is not a duel. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And so it's
the funny thing about that scene is initially, like the other soldiers on the battlefield sort of circled around those two,
yeah,
didn't they? It's like, okay, now it's not like this is, oh, hey, we're going to watch a show here, but
yeah.
this is how we do business, or this is how conflict takes place and how conflict gets resolved. And it was sort of a weird cultural understanding until, yeah, that the archer shoots up Kargan. That's his name, right?
Oh, what's that?
Oh, what, Kargan?
No, Chiron's arc.
Chiron's okay, yeah.
Yep.
Until an archer just shoots the bad guy in the head.
Yeah.
And it's like, what?
Because it's like, and that's the
Mhm.
thing. It's like you have, what you have at play is the fact that there are a lot of there are a lot of Hamans who have been drafted into this battle. They're not soldiers.
Mhm.
Like they've had a a brief introduction into what it means to go and do this and to be this, and it's like, yeah, we're trying to bring everybody in from both sides. And so this idea, like they're going to circle up and they're going to watch and they're going to see, yeah, there's going to be this duel, and this is, it's like,
Mhm.
and it's an actual professional soldier who kind of comes through and says, no, that's not how we're
Yeah.
going to do this. Like we're going to win this the right way, and
Yep.
like we're not putting all the chips on you. Like that's stupid. Let's
Mhm.
go. We have, like, this is not a time for glory. Like little boy, come with
Right.
us and let's do this the right way.
Mhm.
And that's like that's what it is. Like I like to do that, and drop in things like that where it's like, yeah, there's and what'll happen is, in many cases, just like what I did with that battle, it's like I'll write a bunch of stuff, I'll write a bunch of dialogue, or I'll write interaction, and then I'll go back and I'll say, no, we're going to trim that up, and like some of these
Mhm.
like Xandria Koss is all over the place, where it's just like she cuts people off, she's
Mhm.
sarcastic, and it's like, no, this is not what we're going to do. We're not going to spend a ton of time wasting our breath on these things. This is how we're going to do this. We're going to do this the right way, and like stop being stupid.
Mhm.
And like I definitely poke fun at some science fiction here and there by doing that.
Okay, yeah.
It's like
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were doing that, but I'm glad to hear it.
yeah, it's you know what I mean. And again, like I've been reading and watching sci-fi for for decades,
Mhm.
right? And it's just it's something just around the idea of it's like yeah, sometimes you take yourself a little too seriously,
Mhm.
and like Xandria is there for me to use as a tool to say it's like yeah, you don't need to take yourself that seriously. Like you can we
Mhm.
can move on from this, and and look, people make a like they make a point or they try to put on airs or they try to like oh this is going to be a moment, and sometimes I let it happen, and
Mhm.
sometimes I let there be a moment because yeah, like you have to have like you can't shuffle it off all the time.
Yeah.
That's not life. But in other points like you have to say it's like no, this is going to blow up in your face,
Mhm.
because it was always going to blow up in your face because the way that you projected it in your head is not the way it's going to play out in reality
Right.
because people are not going to read your script.
Mhm.
And just there's so much of regular life that's like that it just it kind
Mhm.
of it fits to me in this universe because at the end of the day, these are people interacting, and I think that's
Mhm.
important. In to just it always takes me out of a story when like when the good guys and the bad guys suddenly are on each other's scripts.
Mhm.
Like, oh yeah, he's gonna say this and then I'm gonna say that, and it's like, and then it happens that way. It's like, well, that's dumb.
Yeah.
And so like there are times where I'll explain like, oh, I'm gonna explain the plan to you, here's what's gonna happen. And then say, yeah, that's the plan. Great, we're gonna go do it. And then it blows up within the first few minutes. And they, what happened? Like, well, what happened is that you failed to take into account the fact that someone else is going to think differently than you. They're
Right.
not necessarily going to do what you thought they should do, and that's I mean like that's when stuff blows up in Portis's face,
Oh yeah.
and like it's just which it's just like he cannot comprehend. Like here he is, he's a prince where everything's gone the way he's always wanted it because he's the
Yeah.
prince, and then he tries to go and take an action that he thinks that he's going to be the big hero, and
Mhm.
it goes really really
He is
wrong.
completely unprepared
Oh yeah,
for anything that
oh yeah.
happens there. It's very. It was almost kind of amusing in a way.
Yeah, well, that might have been like that sequence might have been my favorite part to write
Mhm.
of the entire book because it was like it was that like the hubris just going so very wrong and realizing oh so this is why my dad didn't do this
Mhm.
and then like Okala further manipulating the situation in a
Oh
way that
yeah.
like it still removes his like possible heroic moment
Mhm.
and like he just cannot comprehend that things did not go the way that he thought they would, even when he got into the bind, and the bind didn't go the way that he thought it would, you
Mhm.
know, because that's just it. It's like, yeah, there are other plans at work here, and you didn't bother to figure out what they were. You just charged in like I'm the hero,
Mhm.
and you got your ass kicked.
Oh yeah. Mhm. Cool. So we kind of had a cliffhanger ending here.
Yes.
Yeah. So this looks like an epic series in the making, which we both discussed a little bit. So what can we expect in the near future?
What can we expect in the future? Well, there's a bit that we can think to here, right? Um, Part of it is going to be like at some stage, you know, it has to resolve, right? It can't
Mhm.
just be this way forever. So at some point, one side's going to win to some degree,
Mhm.
but as you could probably expect by now, it's not going to be a black and white ending, right?
Right.
So, I think that you're going to see other characters start to rise up from like little bit parts. I don't like to um, just introduce a character and then throw them away
Mhm.
without giving them some sort of use, some sort of ending.
Mhm.
So there are definitely characters who make comebacks. Um, I do believe that dead is dead. I mean, even all my
Mhm.
years of reading comic books, where like no one's. What's the joke was always no one's ever permanently dead
Mhm.
in comics, but if you're dead, you're dead, right?
Mhm.
But if you're just assumed dead, if there's a presumption, if you just think that person might be dead,
Okay, I
yeah,
know who you're talking about.
yeah. So like there are definitely going to be folks who are going to impact and come back.
Yeah, explosive
Um,
devices don't always work the way they're intended to, do they?
No.
Okay.
But you also have, I think it's also important that, like, you're going to twist and you're going to see that different plans will play out in ways that folks will not realize. And so,
Mhm.
in book 2, there are some unintended consequences. There's some collateral damage. And so there are some characters who I happen to really like who sort of have things go a little badly for them.
Mhm.
I think that folks are going to find that Tears is going to become even more important in the second book.
Mhm.
Um, I think that some of the alliances from the houses are going to kind of step out where people hadn't thought about. It's like, oh no, wait, hang on, what just happened?
Mhm.
Because again, I have this sprawling doc that it's got to be about 50 pages at this point, and like there's complicated, intermingling between houses and characters and stuff like that folks don't know about
Mhm.
yet. That I'm going to get to bring to the forefront. I'm gonna, and I had mentioned earlier, I'm gonna start showing some more power within Carva and some things that
Mhm.
folks don't know about
Oh,
yet.
cool. I'm glad to see
And
you're developing Carva more, because
oh
that was a
yeah,
really neat aspect of the world.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's fun because like it's I just sort of I wrote up a bunch of rules and things that can happen,
Mhm.
and I've only touched on a little bit of it yet. So, but on top of that, it also allows me, like, sometimes I've sat there, it's like, oh wait, you know what? If you can do this and you do this, it would make sense that you could do that also. And so
Mhm.
I have something that I haven't written it yet, but I'm thinking of how I can use it in the third book.
Mhm.
And I don't know how long this is going to go. To be honest, I mean, I've got 3 books planned out,
Mhm.
but I also have like some short stories and stuff there. I also have like these, these myths and legends from their pantheon of gods
Mhm.
that I kind of want to play around with. So we'll have to see where it goes. But it's been a lot of fun. Actually, you want a sneak preview from the second book?
Absolutely, go for it.
All right, here we go. And I'm not going to tell you where this is pulling from. I was trying to make sure when I was pulling some stuff out for you that that it's not going to be spoiler.
Okay.
but
Okay.
but all right, here we go. I'll give you a couple lines. All right. So Ogun and Sargon headed out to Tarkon. The port city sat on the continent of Tourmaline, most notable for where the new space elevator was being built. Harko aside, this was the most ambitious expansion on the planet. For Ogun, however, something more important leapt to the front of his mind. Vircho was here. The remnants of the destroyed Virchoan capital city. These ruins reminded everyone who had ultimately won the War of Lords. True, the long reign of the Antares family over the Empire served as the most poignant reminder. Ogun's redesignation as the Antares Empire was a rather emphatic point as well. As Archon, however, he took pride in seeing the ruins any time he visited the new space elevator. Archon Charon Antares had decided to build here. He felt that a new city and site for a second space elevator would change the land for the better. Ogun himself, however, had ensured that the ruins were never cleared away. He fought for it when he was just a prince. Once he took his post as Archon, it was one of his first orders of business with the Council of Travelers. Virtue would stand for as long as the winds of time allowed it to, stand for a reminder of the ultimate failure of House Virachoa. Being near them once again today was good for his mind and spirit. They were just off in the distance, barely visible, but Ogun knew they were there. He could feel them out there, radiating whatever evil still clung to cobalt and stone structures, his own personal memento from moments just like these. House Antares had triumphed over House Virachoa again and again. He'd be able to come through this as well.
Colonizing the ruins of your enemy.
And there's, a little more into, like, there's Ogun, man. Like, yeah, he's the good guy and he wants to be benevolent. He wants this empire that's going to be good for everybody. But he's can still be vindictive. It's like, yeah, you know
He's a
what?
little more aggressive there, yeah.
Yeah, it's like that's right. Here we have this beautiful, amazing space elevator. Oh, and
Uh,
over there, that's where you guys failed.
yeah.
And it's just like to rub in, and so it's like, yeah, he's the good guy, but he's not always a good guy.
Yeah. A little petty, but I can understand it. I mean, that's not
Yeah.
outside the boundaries of cultural acceptability in the universe. Cool. So, are you're self-published? Is that correct?
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Okay,
No, this is
cool.
this is all me and the lovely Kindle digital marketplace or whatever Amazon's calling it these days. And I think
Mhm.
I had a friend who she reads through Kobo, so I put it on there. She tore through. There's a former colleague of mine up in Canada. She tore through the first book so fast. She's like, "Are you almost done with the second one yet?" I was like,
Oh, wow.
um, this was like in December. No, it's like, well, write faster. I was like, "Okay, I'm working on it."
I take that as a compliment. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Not a doubt.
I thought it was great. But yeah, I was like, so yeah. So for her, I'm trying to get it done as fast as I can.
Okay, cool. So we get the second book in the pipeline pretty soon, huh?
Yep. Yeah. So my goal is I've got one last chapter to edit. And I like to go back and read through and make sure that it's like, oh, did I explain this properly, or is this too wordy? I mean, there are chapters that have grown by a couple of paragraphs. There are other chapters that it's like, oh, I've just deleted entire pages worth of text because it's like, this doesn't need to be here. But yeah, my hope is maybe in the next couple of weeks, book 2 is going to come out.
Oh, well, cool. Perfect timing then, huh?
Oh yeah.
Cool. All right. So where can we find you on social media?
I am on. Most of the stuff that I'll do is tends to be through Twitter, where I interact with folks. There's also an Antares Ascended Facebook page.
Okay.
I mean, I am on Instagram, but it's mostly pictures of my kid and and our lacrosse team and stuff like that. But
well, I can put that Instagram account in the show notes if you want, but or I can leave it.
Yeah, I mean, most of it's like, honestly, I try to post some stuff on Facebook at least once a week, where it's just, hey, like, here's a little nugget, behind the scenes and stuff, and I'm trying to write up a few different things that I can put in there where it's just, yeah, you can understand a little more about the universe, but I also don't want to, do any spoilers for the book. So you're better off reading it. And I'm told it's a good read. And I'm trying not to be biased or anything like that. But I've been told by folks that they've actually been digging it, and that they're waiting for book 2 to come out. So I'm trying to get it out there for everybody.
Right on. Cool. Gary, it's been a pleasure talking with you. It's a very enjoyable conversation. Thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This has been a great time, man. Thank you so much.
Awesome.